You're listening to the Human Experience on Design in Focus, a new multimedia channel seeking to demonstrate the impact and value of CID in business and society. CID, creativity, innovation, and design. On the Human Experience, we talk with creatives, innovators, and designers about these disciplines and what it means to them, and how they find value, stay inspired, what they have learned, and what they aspire to do. Hi, and welcome to the Human Experience on Design in Focus. Today I'm speaking with Robbie Farrell, and we'll be talking about the design process. Hey Robbie, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hey Candice, yeah, I can do indeed. My name's Robbie, originally from Ireland. Actually moved to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam here just over, nearly 6 years ago now, or no, 5.5 years ago. And before I moved over here, I'd been working as a product designer in different companies there and moving between different places. And I just kind of got a bit of a bug to travel and to kind of move abroad. And I got a job here at Booking.com and moved over. And I've been here the last 5 years, enjoying the windy, wet winters and the kind of the lovely summers. But loving all the cycling around and everything that comes with the nice lifestyle here.
Yeah, well, I think you have quite a bit of a background with, as you said, Booking, but also IBM and Adidas. So I think you've got quite a broad experience set at, some very established companies. And so for those who are wishing to up their career or strategy, I think, you have a lot to share. Could you start by telling us a little bit what you're doing right now and how you transitioned into it?
Yeah, sure. So I guess at the minute I'm working as a freelance product designer, and the kind of the route that I kind of took to get to it maybe wasn't the most conventional one or the most typical one that you'd read on blogs. It actually started out when I was younger. I seen the DVD of Tiesto playing in concert, and he's this big Dutch DJ, and he was playing to like 25,000 people. And I think I was like 14 when I seen it, and he was actually playing in the Gerra Dome in Arnhem when he was playing. And I remember seeing it and thinking like, I want to be that guy. Like I want to be the guy in front of like 25,000 people DJing, which is kind of weird because I don't like being in front of a group of people. But like when it came to DJing, I was like, you don't really have to talk to people. You just have to play good music and dance. I ended up buying my first set of DJ equipment when I was 15 and started DJing at home and just visualizing playing in front of crowds of people. And then when I was 17, I started running some club nights in Ireland with a couple of friends like from my area that also DJed. And one of the things we had to do was pay €50 to get a poster designed every time. And when you're 17, €50 goes a long way. So basically we were like, okay, we have to save that money somehow. So I basically downloaded Photoshop and started just designing the posters myself. And they look pretty bad, but they saved us €50 every time. And from there, I did that for a little while, but I thought like this design work was pretty cool. I started designing like different posters and business cards and things. And basically from there, I finished school. You can't apply to be a DJ. You just have to work into that. So I needed to do something in the meantime. And I actually got a job at a placement in a college doing multimedia and web development for a year. And it was very basic and very outdated what they taught, but I got work experience in a web design studio for 2 weeks. And it was basically, they taught me how to write HTML and CSS and how to like literally not think about things from a graphic design perspective, but think about it from a web perspective. And basically from there, I was hooked. Did 2 weeks there. I actually messaged a few big DJs in Ireland on social media and actually got to do their websites for them as well and got paid for it as well, which I couldn't believe. And then I went back to the web design agency and I actually worked for free for like 3 months, I think, in the summer for them. And And basically from there, they gave me a part-time job, then a full-time, and then I just stayed there. And I think that was one of the things like that people are always like giving out lately and saying like never to work for free, but there definitely is sometimes when it
Yeah.
is useful, and that was kind of the only thing that got me in the door really with a job.
Yeah.
So basically from there, I stayed for like a few years working at that small design studio or web design agency, and it was brilliant, like taking projects from start to finish. And that was kind of where I guess that product designer mindset was kind of embedded in me, like is owning things from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I went there. I worked in a bigger agency in Dublin for a bit, and then I moved over to the corporation side and worked in Intel, doing educational applications. Then moved to IBM after that. And I think IBM was like where it sort of shifted from being a bit more of a UI focused designer to being like, okay, like UX and user centric design, because at the time IBM was kind of going through this big change from like an engineering led company to being a design led company. And there
Mm-hmm.
was people like I think it was Phil Gilbert and others were kind of leading this initiative to bring design thinking into the company. And that was
Yeah.
kind of at the center of everything they do. And they basically created like their own framework for design thinking that they didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
always call it let's use design thinking, but it was kind of like the IBM design framework or whatever it was they called it. And it had this very simple kind of process, and they taught all of us how to use it. And designers were kind of like the facilitators of this process. And basically, I got all this hands-on training and hands-on experience, and all of a sudden went from being a bit more of like focused on my team to being okay, you have to think about the whole department, like what's the project doing, like facilitate the strategic discussions and how to take things from a business problem all the way through to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And basically when I left there, I stayed there for a while, and that's when I actually moved to Amsterdam after that. And I joined Booking, and Booking is like Booking.com. Everybody knows it as the e-commerce, kind of a holy grail for travel. And yeah, it's been a very successful product, but it
Mm-hmm.
was also very much a heavily optimized product. And it was very, very well known for A/B experimentation, very well known for kind of being able to rapidly kind of improve little like iterate ideas or problems within the product, and kind of yeah, just basically dominate the market with it. And I guess when I kind of joined, there was a big change that they wanted to do more than just accommodations. They wanted to be able to do rental cars and taxis and flights and everything else. So that kind of
Yeah.
required bigger change. Like they needed to change how they work and how they think. And I kind of just seen like I love running workshops, and I just love how they bring people together and get you away from computer and help you to just think about things outside the box and work in a
Yeah.
very kind of collaborative way with it. So I basically seen that. I was like, oh, like I could kind of teach some people in Booking to do that.
Yeah.
So myself and a few others co-created a design sprint training and ran that in like I think December 2017, and it was great. But I think one of the things we realized from it was that design when you run a design sprint, it's basically a design thinking workshop. And if you don't fully understand the differences between them, sometimes it's hard to then modify your design sprint depending on different needs the teams has. So we actually flipped it around, and this was kind of something that like there's a big company called AJ and Smart who facilitate workshops and give trainings on design sprints, and they went really heavy on design sprint training and facilitation for a long time. And in the last couple of years, they've switched to more like a design thinking focus, where I like to facilitate any type of workshop, which is
Yeah.
basically what we kind of adopted as well and realized in Booking is that people need to understand the process behind it before you start running the workshops. And
Yeah.
that way you can create these like custom workshops as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that kind of like was the in Booking. Like I worked in a lot of products, different product teams within the company, but I
Yeah.
also ran trainings and facilitated workshops, and just it gave me kind of a nice way of meeting new people across the company, because it's a big company, and yeah, it's a lot of people you can meet and problems to solve there, which is always keeps it quite varied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very cool. I see so many overlaps in your career and mine. And I think, as creatives, there are certain journeys that we follow. Um, And it's not always like bookcases. Like a lot of people think you go to university, you study to become a UX designer or, a designer, and you have this linear path where you do that. And I find that the best people end up in the best positions when they flow according to how they evolve. Does that make sense? Or
Well, I guess in a way, when I look back on it now, I would say they're kind of my talents because I worked on them for a long time. But
Mhm.
back when I was starting out as a DJ or starting out in design or starting to run workshops, I didn't really feel like it was a talent. I felt like it was kind of like a thing that I need to work hard on and just figure out. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like, yeah, I think I just loved doing them. And I think when you
Mhm.
just find something that I enjoy doing and do more of it, it naturally leads to something. Like you'll either get asked to do it more, or you will find, okay, maybe I should pivot into this different role that I could do, or maybe it's like, yeah, it'll just naturally spark something new that you didn't expect to come. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of always good to remind me of those earlier days starting out because it's a good reminder that if I ever feel a bit burnt out or like if I feel a bit like I'm not enjoying work, it's like just always get back to doing what you enjoy doing. And even if that's like an hour a day doing it before work or after work or trying to get it into your day to day, like it just gives that creativity and gives you that enjoyment that you get, and it sort of sparks that kind of that flow again.
Yeah. You mentioned having to start with free work or volunteer work. And, I found personally that these sort of experiences give you a lot of, credit in a way, because if you can complete a volunteer job, then you must have some sort of like tenacity in you because you know, also with my organization, Design in Focus, I take on volunteers, and sometimes there's not enough motivation to see it to the end of the project. So by doing that free work, you really set yourself apart because you were managing to do it and to stay motivated doing it, and so you proved yourself maybe on some level your capabilities. And another thing that really resonated with me personally is also booking. Before I came to the Netherlands, I was living in Portugal, and we came here to look at the schools and to look at jobs and so forth. And I went to see somebody HR in at booking, and I said, "Well, look at my resume. Do you think, sorry, do you think I'm hireable? Would you be interested in hiring somebody like me?" And they said yes. You've got a very nice portfolio. Please come to the Netherlands. And yeah, I think Booking is quite a good company. I've recently done. Yeah, I signed an NDA, so I can't really talk about it. But I also did some interfaces for them, and it's very dynamic when you look at booking, there are people sort of come and go all the time. They always have positions for designers. So how do you manage to stay in a role like that when there's frequently so much turnover? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Booking is a very mature company in terms of UX. And with that comes like you have to kind of think that, okay, they're very ahead. They have very good processes in place. They have very good talent already in company. They've already figured out a lot of the problems that companies are just struggling with and will be struggling with for a long time. They've just had that, yeah, basically that time to figure these things out and set up communities and groups within it and figure this all out and even creating the structure now. Like I think when I joined, you would have like a core designer, a senior, and I think principal and director. Whereas now they've added leads, design manager, senior design manager, a VP, and there's probably other roles. I don't even know. There's a design ops role as well. So with that, it's become more specific that they've been more looking for like people that fit those specific roles rather than maybe a senior that is sort of lead and maybe a bit of a principal kind of type role. They might be hiring a bit of a generalist before. So I think
Mm-hmm.
now it's they obviously the role they're still hiring at the minute, and I think that's one of the big things I noticed that a lot of people can come in at they might have been a lead designer in another company, but they'll come in as a senior in booking, or they might
Mm-hmm.
have been a director in a previous one and come in at a principal level. And I kind of only noticed that in the last like, couple of years, like when I've seen them sort of put the more structure in place of the different titles. And I think that's always something to keep in mind, that maybe you might be a senior now, but you should always kind of look at the core role in booking as well, because there's such a very advanced kind of UX group there that it's still a high expectation that they have for a core level or a senior, even if you're a level above in your existing company. So I think being open-minded to that is definitely one side of it, that you might not
Mhm.
always get the stay at the same level. But there is good career progression that happens there, and it's very structured as well. Um, the other side then for getting in is you have to think there's obviously a lot of people hiring, or sorry, applying. Back when I joined, they were hiring like crazy. There was like 50 or 60 people starting the job every 2 weeks for the space of a year, which was just crazy, crazy
Yeah.
growth. Whereas now it's like they're hiring specific designers for a specific team role. And I think that
Mhm.
that's super important, that you make sure you have something to offer to that role. So if they're looking for a
Mhm.
designer of flights, for example, like do you have some experiences relevant to it would be kind of great. But having
Mhm.
something that's very applicable to the type of team that they're trying to manage and that the experience is there.
Mhm.
Um, I think they're very heavy on yeah, basically on the design side. It's like the visual side doesn't have to be as strong, but really good product thinking, really
Yeah.
good problem solving or problem identification, and to be able to diverge and converge and kind of show like that design thinking process and mindsets.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also applicable to a lot of other companies as well. Like they have a very similar process, but it's our mindset about hiring. But yeah, they definitely do look for kind of the as good a talent as they can get, and
Yeah.
it kind of shows with the products they delivered.
Yeah. IBM was before Booking, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Because IBM is, of course, better, or well, also a well-known company, and been around for a really long time. There are a lot of people who are doing camps or studying specifically for one focus point at university, and many of them think that that is the way to secure a good position at these high companies. What's the word? At these large corporations. I mean, like when you were planning to be a DJ, did you ever see yourself as a product designer?
If I kind of had thought about setting a goal for myself when I was like 18, just out of college or just out of school, sorry, and thinking, okay, like what do I want to do? Okay, I love to be a product designer working at booking.com on big products. Like a lot of people set this nice big goal, and it's a good goal because it's a big company. Um, it's a good compensation package that comes with it. It's a very big opportunity to grow within it. And from there, then your career just can take off.
Yeah,
If I had set that goal when I was 18 and said, okay, booking is my goal, I probably wouldn't have joined that small web design studio. There was only three other people working there. And I probably wouldn't have joined the digital agency that I worked in Dublin, because there's only 15 or so people working there. Because I would have said they're too small, they're not big enough products, they won't pay enough, and all of these different things. I would have made excuses for it, and I would have got too
yeah,
fixated on this big goal. And whereas with the route that I took, it was just more about like, oh, this kind of seems like really fun stuff to do. Like, why don't I just try this for a while? And that was just it. Like that was kind of the simple thinking. And I was a little bit more beneficial. It was like benefit was on my side, that I didn't have to worry as much about money when I was younger, like living at home. And I didn't have big college debt or anything like that as well to worry about. So I could kind of afford to take these lower paying
yeah,
jobs, but it does pay off. Like I think with most things anyway, like if you work hard at something for a few years and build
yeah,
up a reputation in whatever industry it is, you'll get that kind of experience in a portfolio, and you can go for bigger roles. So I
yeah,
think that with the boot camps and everybody starting out in UX and design or even development, whatever it is, it's very easy to get caught up on like, okay, which company pays the
yeah,
most and gives us big stock options and is the biggest name that can put on my portfolio,
yeah,
rather than thinking about like what can I do that I'd actually really enjoy doing for the next few years or next year. Because the thing is, when you really enjoy doing something, it doesn't feel like work. And that's like when I run workshops and when I'm doing like thinking about process and kind of like thinking about like how do I structure like this project or like the workshop that's coming up. It just feels like that's the fun part of my job, where I'm like, oh, this is like the cool thing that actually just makes me forget about like that I actually have to that I get paid for this thing. Like I'm like, oh, this is just something I do for fun. And finding that thing is kind of like you naturally work hard at it. And I think when I was in booking, like I had to do all this design thinking, design sprint work on the side. And I just never thought about it. I just did it because it was fun. And then like people called me like the design thinking guy in booking after that because I was just running trainings and workshops and writing articles about it in the company. So I was basically like building a brand without knowing it, and I was just actually building it around something that I enjoyed, which was super cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I also relate with you with the design thinking workshops because I'm actually giving my first workshop next month, and I want to learn as much as I can so that I don't bugger it up. It's quite nerve-wracking. Do you have any advice or learnings that you can share that your experience when you started to where you are now?
Yeah, I think there's just a couple of like very basic things about a workshop that kind of always guides it no matter what happens. And usually what I kind of do, like every time someone like has asked me like, hey, can you like review our workshop plan or can you do a workshop for us? So I just sit down and usually like the main thing I just ask is what problem are you trying to solve with the workshop and what's your goal with it and what's the kind of like deliverables that you want to take from it.
Mhm.
Because basically it's like that's a start and the end point. You have to start with what is the problem that you're trying to solve in it. So whether it's like, oh, we need to like improve or sorry, like for example, logins have decreased on our platform recently, and we want to figure out new ways to improve the login experience. So
Yeah,
very clear problem with very clear like metrics that you're trying to improve. And then the
hmm
goal of the workshop is that we want to create a tested prototype by the end of the week so that we can actually potentially hand it to developers or very quickly iterate it and get it ready for development. And then
yeah,
basically from there, you have like a start and an end point and kind of having everybody aligned like around a goal and the problem is key. And then within that, then that's where you can start then planning a workshop. So
yeah,
usually with the workshop as well, like kind of like when I'm talking about this problem and goal, it's like I'll do that with whoever the stakeholder is. And something to kind of like watch, definitely within a bigger company, is that you have to try and figure out who the stakeholders are. So
hmm
it might be this team, for example, like if we're in booking, we would maybe like the a pricing team was running a workshop, and there's like a product manager, a designer, a copywriter, developers in the team. But then sometimes there's also maybe a senior product manager or a director who's quite heavily has a quite heavy influence on this project. So it might be good to bring them in to kind of say, like, hey, what do you think about this workshop? Do you know, is this clear the problem that we're trying to solve? And just make sure there's any stakeholders that could potentially have a different opinion about the workshop. It's good to get them on board and to make sure they're aligned with it as well.
hmm
So usually like I've like templates that I have like in Google Docs and it has this it just has all it has is problem, the goal, deliverables that we want, and then like a little empty agenda as well that I can start planning with. And
yeah,
usually that's like you could get that done in a couple of hours. Like you can literally sit down with them for an hour and understand that problem and get it written down. Like a problem should be something that like can sit in one sentence or one short paragraph and very clearly highlight what the issue is. The
yeah,
goal should be the same thing. It's usually just one or two lines at most. Like this is what we want to achieve, and maybe one or two deliverables of the workshop. And then as the facilitator, then you can go and like plan the agenda and start kind of seeing who needs to be involved, materials and things like that.
yeah. I think you did mention that you made a couple of mistakes in the beginning. We're almost out of time, so we've got about 10 more minutes, just maximum 10 minutes. You mentioned some mistakes that you made in the beginning. Can you walk us through that and how you learned from your mistakes and that you didn't stop when you made mistakes, how you overcame it and continued on?
Sure. Maybe, yeah, maybe one of the bigger one, like the bigger mistake I've kind of made on a more global level was I remember I joined a team in booking.com as well at one point, and it was a new team. And I remember like I was kind of running trainings around design thinking and looking at the process and how I could improve it in the company and what ways I could sort of bring it to the community. And I remember joining the team and thinking like, okay, they don't really think in a very user-centric way. They don't really do much qualitative research. They don't really do much diverging on their ideas. And I just kind of came in and said, okay, like we need to bring in design thinking. We need to improve our process and our mindset, and we need to change this, this, and this. And it was very much like when I look at it, it was very much like I was attacking. I was very much like everything's wrong, it's broken, we need to fix it. But really, when I look at it, it was like, no, I just needed to help them do a bit more usability testing and diverge a bit more on the ideas before they picked one to go ahead with. Very
Mm-hmm.
simple. Like and if I'd just done those little changes, then in a way it would be pretty much like a design thinking process because nothing was
Mm-hmm.
that majorly broken. And then also with like sometimes with design sprints, I've seen people like kind of come in and say like, hey, like we need to like figure out what to do with this project. Let's just run a design sprint. And like a design sprint requires like 4 or 5 days of everybody's time and weeks of planning beforehand. So that's an expensive and time consuming, like expensive financially and time as well. So what I kind of end up like realizing after a lot of mistakes is that when you want to do workshops or do any of these things like design thinking or design sprints, it's very counterproductive to go in and say we need to do this thing, but more try phrase it around the business problem that's at hand. So, for example, if a
Yeah.
product manager is like, "Hey, we're stuck on like on come up with new ideas for this project," and we're not really come up with like new things. It's more like we're stuck in the same way of thinking. Then you're like, okay, let's do a brainstorm and let's do something a bit more like out of the box and try something. And we'll plan a half-day session. We'll get everyone like onto a different meeting room or a different offsite venue, and then you can sort of maybe take a part of the design sprint with the sketching and inject that into kind of like the workflow. So now when I'm like talking to teams, like I'm like, I never even mention the words design thinking or design sprint. I kind of just say like, hey, let's run a workshop for a few days to come up with some tested prototypes. And then they're like, is that like a design sprint? And they're like, yeah, it basically is a design sprint. But just for some reason it just flips in people's minds that you're focused on the problem at hand rather than just doing buzzwords, kind of like keyword
Yeah.
workshops then as well.
Pretty awesome. So, do you give workshops outside of your current role? Do you offer any services that somebody can come to you and say, "Hey, Robbie, help us with this"?
Yeah, I do indeed. Like I freelance like anything from custom design thinking workshops. Like most of them is the custom design thinking workshops, and I do some design sprints as well. But usually a design sprint is quite modified. But yeah, I've been doing them for basically I was working doing a freelance contract in Adidas recently and facilitated some workshops there. And also then yeah, outside of my day-to-day work, I work with smaller companies as well and do things remote and sometimes in person as well.
All right. So, how can somebody contact you if they want to hire you or work with you? What are your websites and links?
Sorry, yeah, LinkedIn is always the best. Robbie Farrell, you can find me there. I'm pretty active on it, and always check my messages. So it's the easiest way to get in touch and to kind of see all the services that I offer there as well. And yeah, my website as well, robbiefarrell.com. So you can contact me on either of those.
All right. Thank you very much, Robbie. It was a pleasure speaking with you today. And yeah, I hope to see you at one of the Randstad UX events as a presenter.
Hopefully. Thank you very much, Candice, for the opportunity to speak anyway in the conversation.
Thank you, Robbie. Have a good day.
You too. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
If you've enjoyed listening to this session, please subscribe to us and follow us on social media. Visit designinfocus.org for more information and content. Design in Focus is a labor of love and can use any and all support. If you'd like to help keep us alive, please consider making a small donation.